It's Lit Book Reviews. We are here
Yeah.
yet again. This is the channel, page, podcast, whatever, where we discuss all things books. So here we are again. As always, I am Rebecca Ferguson, and with me is my co-host who is here every time as well. That's Emma Stone. And we're happy to be back for another one. How you doing? How you doing?
Doing good, man. Have you seen
Andy?
speaking of Emma Stone, the Cruella de Vil movie that she's in?
I have not. I've not seen
It's
that.
actually it's good.
Is it Flames?
You
Sweet.
don't like musicals, right? Or did I make that
Can't
up?
stand them. Cannot stand them.
You may not like it then, dude. Honestly, I don't know why. I like musicals.
Yeah, dude, that might be top 3 most interesting facts
It's
about
kind of
you. If
wild
there's
that you.
one thing that I would like, if I knew everything else about you except that, and you told me to guess, like, what's one random thing about Andrew that you don't know yet? Not in many lifetimes would I guess he loves musicals.
I
It's
mean,
the most
I feel
random
like
thing
it's.
about
Do you
you.
think more people? I mean, do you think it's it's a hot take to like musicals? Because I feel like more people like musicals than don't like
No,
musicals,
no, you're right. It's not, but just I don't
or
know
like they're at
why.
least
There's like nothing
indifferent.
specific that I can think of, but for some
Dude, you
reason I
like
just wouldn't
music
think you
though. You
would.
think it's because you like music that you don't like musicals? Because like that is, I've never
I
really
don't
thought
know.
about it, but you're
I mean, you
extremely
like
musically
music.
inclined. Yeah, but like you can do music. You know what I mean? Like you can just
I can do it.
you can do it.
Yeah, I mean,
So I
I
would
get what
think
you're
you would
saying, but
appreciate it more,
I don't know. You would
but
think,
maybe
but
that
I don't,
helps
man.
you not like it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because like The Greatest Showman, have you ever seen that? Because
No,
I
but
know
I
you
mean,
love
many people
Hugh
have
Jackman.
I do like Hugh Jackman. I've been told by many people that it's great and I should watch it,
Yeah.
but when it comes down to having time to watch a movie or a show, I'm just not watching a musical, bro. It's
I
not
mean, I get
happening.
it. Yeah. I mean, it's a way different vibe than just,
Yeah.
Oppenheimer or like, I don't
Yeah.
know, All Quiet on the
I
Western
mean,
Front. It's definitely a
anything.
different
You could
vibe.
name any movie that's not a musical and I would be like, yeah, exactly,
The
like
Dark
that.
Knight. There's a lot of movies that'd be wild if they were musicals.
uh,
Anyway, but yeah, dude, I'm doing great. I don't know why that just
good.
sparked. I think that's I may have. I'm pretty sure that the Cruella movie is a musical, but anyway, it's good.
This whole time
I
we're
don't know
talking
why
and
I
somebody's
just.
listening like, that's not even a
That's
musical.
not a musical. Yeah, yeah. Dude, I will say I
uh,
did see a and dude, you would hate this take. It was a short from Two to Ramble, and they were saying that the best adaptations, the reason why fantasy adaptations are like never good is because they don't ever do musicals, and they were saying that musicals would be like what would make them great. And I'm like, what a wild take. Because I mean, I
I
like
mean,
music. Can you imagine like, I don't know, Dune as a musical or something? I mean, it'd be
yeah,
just
and I
crazy.
just whenever I see a musical start happening, there's just something
Takes you out.
that it just completely takes me out. It immediately becomes like comical, not in a good way. It's like uncomfy to me, and it's just I'm just
Mm.
thinking, what is happening? Like,
You gotta
are the
watch Hamilton.
characters in this movie? Do they all know that they're singing, or is that just like a device to entertain us? Like, are they all singing their thoughts to each other? It's just, I get completely taken out of it.
That's funny to think about. But you would, dude. You really would like Hamilton, man. Like you
I
would
know. I
appreciate it on
definitely need
a
to watch
deep
that
level
one.
because it is like it's very well written, like very well written, and it's not like there's not a ton of historical inaccuracies. If anything, there's like a lot of like you would like a common person would learn a lot about like founding fathers and just like time, like how it was back then, just from watching it. So
Right.
it's good. But anyway,
I got to
that's
check it
enough
out for
of
sure.
a rant. I'll
Yeah.
watch it
Well,
tonight, honestly.
on to today's subject. So as we were closing out the year that is called 2023, we thought we would discuss some of our favorite books from this year. So we started the channel this year in, when was our first video? September, August, something like that.
Something like that
So
this summer.
kind of, the latter half of this year. So we didn't get to cover everything we read this year. And some of the ones we'll talk about today, we probably have discussed on the channel. Some of them we have not. So yeah, we're just going to talk about some of our favorite books, specifically nonfiction. So we are going to just talk about the history and other general nonfiction stuff that we've read this year and what what tops the list out. So I'm usually more nonfiction inclined, so I'm excited for this one. As much fantasy as I read this year, there were still a good bit of nonfictions that I got in, mostly at the first half of the year. So it was kind of difficult for me. So I'm actually going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with some honorable mentions before we get to your five.
Let's get it.
Okay, so just real quick, some that are not my top five, but I had to mention Man of Iron by Troy Sinnott. This one actually came out this year, and it is about Grover Cleveland, who, if you don't know, served 2 terms as president, but they were not consecutive. He served his first term, and then someone else was president for a term, and then he was elected to his second term, so he had a 4-year gap. So that's like a really interesting thing, and his presidency wasn't all that crazy. There were some cool things, but just kind of his character and how he stuck to his guns is pretty inspiring, and it's a really good read. It's pretty short, too. Next up, The Soul of America by John Meacham, a really good author. This is kind of a general broad book where he, from the perspective of several different presidencies, kind of discusses not only the purpose of the presidency and the kind of reverence that's always been there for it, as far as serving the people is considered, but just how it's shifted in some ways and like where we are now, and kind of comparing that to some previous presidencies of really, great presidents like Washington and Lincoln and so on. So a really good read, also a pretty short one. Last one on honorable mentions, Band of Brothers by Stephen Ambrose. This is an older book. I think it was the late 90s when it came out. It's obviously what the HBO miniseries of the same title is based on, which is one of the best miniseries of all time. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. But it essentially covers Easy Company in World War II, an airborne infantry division, and kind of just all their travels, all their hardships. It's really great. It'll have you crying for sure. So those are my honorable mentions. It didn't make it into my top 5. So let's hear your top 5, Mr. Loach.
All right, so I didn't actually read very many. Let's see. Non-fictions. Is this full screen on your end, or what's it looking like? Or
I'm not seeing anything right now.
Well, that's not good. Let me go ahead and fix that. Sure.
Go ahead and fix that for me.
Well,
there
now,
we go.
What are we thinking now, folks at home? There we
let's
go.
Let's see. It is loading in. Yeah, I'm seeing your whole screen.
All right, that's fine. It doesn't matter if it's not. I can edit it either way. So I didn't read a ton of nonfiction this past year. Not as many as I would like to. There are some books that would definitely be on here that, like Napoleon and the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, I just haven't finished and would be on here. And those books are like really honestly great, and I would recommend anyone to read those if they're looking to learn more about the Napoleonic era. I mean, it's been super informative so far, but also like really well paced. And then same with the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. If you're looking to learn anything about Nazi Germany, it's so in depth. This is a book that I read like very early last year. And I have been on like a big Revolutionary Russia kick for a while, and I haven't read anything like really honestly since this one. Well, there's another book in here that like has some themes too, but anyway, this is like a shorter book, and if someone like I know Jesse, you would really like this book. It just it covers the 100 years from the start of the Russian Revolution to the fall of the USSR, and the start of Russia again, and so in a democratic sense, but it's just like a very high level view of like just hitting all the main points, and especially since I've read a lot, or at least read a decent amount of Russian literature, it was like a really good kind of refresher for me on like all the main points. So anyway, it's just like a quick, easy read. It's not something that is going to be like an Art of Power where it's like 700-800 pages. This is a quick read that's gonna more high end stuff and not really get into the weeds of it, but just kind of show you if it's like, hey, how did Russia get from a monarchical society to hard communism to then getting out of that again in the early 90s. So it's just kind of like a cool little circle through that. But anyway, that was my first book, and I gave it 5 stars, but that's also me just kind of being biased of I love Russian history. So the next book I read,
read that.
you should. It's so
Ben.
easy. Oh, Ben. I actually bought this on a plane while I was in Europe, and or not on a plane. I bought this at the airport, and I read it like on 2 plane rides. It was such a like it's 384 pages, but it's like one of those ones where it looks way bigger than it really is. But it just reads so quick. But anyway, it's Colditz. It's about these prisoners taken during World War II, and it's such an interesting like glimpse into just there's just so many things that went on during World War II, so it's easy for things to get lost. But essentially, this is where they sent like all of the captured like sergeants and generals, like people that were high up for like either France, the U.S., any of the opposing powers against Nazi Germany. And it's just an interesting dynamic of people who like were able to escape, and then also just the dynamic of who was running this like prison camp for these higher ups, because they were like from the German military. So
Mm,
it kind of gives you some introspect into how not everyone in the German military like supported the Nazi regime, and so there was kind of a split between um, just kind of the Nazi party and like the former German military. And so anyway, it's just kind of interesting to think of, there were guys who had integrity, and one of like the main people in this is that's the case, who's like the leader of this prison camp. But anyway, very like obviously narrow story, and like a very
yeah.
super small sliver of like of what happened during World War II. But I mean, it was super fascinating. I read it in like 2 sittings, just because it's a cool. There's a ton of cool little stories that happen with all these like different characters in there. But anyway,
Yeah.
Colditz.
I haven't read that one, but he's a great author, so I definitely
Yeah,
need
I
to
liked it.
read
It
that one
was.
at some point.
I don't think this is a slam because I just think Eric Larson's so good, but it's like a little bit lesser version of Eric Larson to me.
Mm,
Like it reads
yeah, I could see
like a
that.
normal story, like normal fiction, but it's real.
Yeah.
So anyway, I liked it. The next one I have is honestly like like it's so applicable now today. I mean, I read this earlier in the year. I also bought this at an airport in Istanbul, and
You
for
well
those of you who
traveled
don't
boy, you.
know, oh, I'd be traveling. Those of you who don't know, I was held in Kuwait for a year, essentially. Just kidding. It was not against my will. But while I was living there, I was like, well, I might as well learn like at least a little bit about how like these countries got to where they were. And so this was at an airport in Istanbul, and I bought it, and it was honestly really good. A Line in the Sand, Britain, France, and the Struggle that Shaped the Middle East. And it's not a long book either, but it's very insightful to how the countries in the Middle East have gotten to where they are, and it kind of gives you some hints at why there are like why some of the tensions that exist today are there. And dude, it's just crazy. I mean, not that this is even someone who's like has one of those hard like. I mean, I think a lot of people would say there's a ton of bad things about imperialism, but it's not even from
Right.
like one of those slants that is just all about slamming imperialism. But I mean, you can because there's a lot of positives. There are positives. I don't want to say a lot. There are positives that happen with like the certain influences that came in with France
Sure.
and Great Britain.
Yeah.
But dude, it's just crazy, man. Like, and we see this right now, at least where I'm at in the Napoleon in book. It's just France and Britain have been going at each other forever, and like they do all these quasi
Long
war
time.
like things, dude, to like get at each other,
Yeah.
and
Proxy
it's just
wars and everything.
yeah. And honestly, the Middle East takes some L's from this, and it does kind of remind me too, though, of there was not like a lot of unity in the Middle East. So after World War One and the fall of the Ottoman Empire, they're just like basically none of these countries existed. So anyway, I learned a ton from this book, especially with what's going on now, like in Israel and Gaza. Like, I mean, this book is so informative of like hard facts of like what was actually happening, and not like there's no like political feels like this. I was actually able to learn a lot. So I would definitely
Right.
recommend this book, and it's kind of like a niche book. Like I've never seen this book in a store. So anyway,
Yeah.
it was
I've
good.
never even. I remember when you were reading this and talking about it, but outside of that, I've never seen it or heard of it. But it definitely sounds like something I would really enjoy. So I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, and another quick read, so not too
Yeah.
bad. The next book that I read,
Mm,
also got this when I got of Colditz, and it took me a while to get to this one, but got it in London, I think. And it was this edition. It's like the UK edition. I just thought it looked sick. And
mm.
and I've been seeing a lot of Max Hastings in bookstores, and I
Yeah.
hate to say this for Max, but they're always in like the discounted sections. But
Mm,
anyway, this book was great. I I can't say. I mean, I've taught U.S. history a couple times, but every time I've taught U.S. history, it's from like essentially Native American groups up to Reconstruction. So I mean, I've never taught Reconstruction to present. And so I mean,
mm.
obviously I know about the Cuban Missile Crisis like when it comes to like a paragraph, but this was just
Yeah.
obviously an in-depth analysis, and I already like this, like I like Russian history. So obviously this is the back and forth with that. And I mean, I know you know a ton about or at least have read a lot about Kennedy and his brother, and I mean, like the CIA and all that.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, this
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily go deep into that, but it definitely
Mhm.
sets like a framework to where, I mean, you can just see, I mean, there's
Yeah.
just so many wild like things at play in this. So anyway, it's
Right.
an in-depth look at before Cuba, kind of how it got to where it was like ripe for what happened, and then kind of some of the pre things that happened before the Cuban Missile Crisis and that lead to higher tensions, and then just all the different things that are at play. And then obviously it kind of goes back and forth from the US side to the Cuban side to the Soviet Union side. And anyway,
Right.
fascinating book. It's on a very like like exact moment in time, but super important moment in history. So anyway, this one was an easy read too. Like I know some of these, like the last one said 4 something and this one says 5, but this is another one of those books where the pages are like really thick, so it looks like huge, but it's really not. And like the page, like the word break's not too bad. But
Right.
anyway, Abyss, the Cuban
Yeah,
Missile
that's another one that
Crisis.
I would be really interested in reading. I love reading about that. All the 60s, man, are so fascinating to read about.
Oh
Like you
yeah,
said, the birth of the CIA, or at least them being at kind of the zenith of their power, it seems,
yeah.
in that time. All
Which
the
it's like
Kennedys.
minor,
So,
but you would definitely pick up on a lot more stuff than I would, just because I just haven't read a lot about it, sadly. So I'm
right.
sure there
And
was a
then
lot of
there's
stuff
the
that went over my
mob,
head.
dude, the mafia being super involved in all the dealings of politics. So it
Oh
was a
yeah,
fascinating time.
oh yeah. All right. So my last one is one that we reviewed on the channel with Caroline,
Indeed.
and I thought it was great. Definitely more
Hmm.
story vibes. The Wager, A Tale of Shipwreck, Mutiny, and Murder. And dude, I forgot to bring this up when I was talking about books that we've read in that came out in 2023, because this one came out. I only mentioned
Yeah.
like in our last video, so we stayed somewhat relevant. I mean, we've read at least
Yeah,
3
we read a couple.
that were
I mean,
that came out this year.
I read that Troy Seneca book on Grover Cleveland that I just mentioned a minute
Yeah,
ago, and it
that
came
too.
out this
So
year. So
I mean, look,
we had a couple.
we're out here doing the best we can. But anyway, this was a great book. If you want to hear our long-winded thoughts, definitely go watch that video. Definitely a very cool story, something that normally no one would ever know about. And it's just, it makes you never want to get in a boat ever again, but also gives you some serious appreciation for, like,
Man,
I mean, it's just the fact that the people were just in boats at that time is just insanity. So,
to be
and
living at sea on a rickety boat with the lack of medical advancement in this era is just
bro, and this
something
is
else, bro.
what's crazy to really think about is it starts in 1742. And so, I mean, we're talking a good 200 plus years
Well, and
after.
that's when they washed up, which I guess is still only, it doesn't matter actually. That's a pointless
Yeah.
thing to point out.
Yeah, a couple years before. It's like mid 1700s, but I mean,
Yeah.
1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. So I mean, we were out there. They were out here exploring a good 250 before this, when they should not have been. Let's be honest, because even at this moment in time, they didn't have
It's
the
terrible.
facilities for that, bro. That's all I'm
I mean,
saying.
a big chunk of that book is devoted to explaining how horrible of a life it was working on one of these godforsaken vessels
I
in this
mean,
time period.
I can't imagine. I can't imagine, and I don't ever want to imagine. But anyway, yeah, those are 5 of the 5 books that I read this year, and I recommend all of them. I didn't read none of these were books that I was like, man, that was a waste of time. Like I learned something from all of them. None of them were very long. Like all of these were very quick, easy reads. So if any of these topics kind of interested anyone, I would recommend them. They're not like a huge buy-in, so
Yeah.
Cool places
Nice.
to
I
start.
like it. Very nice.
Very nice.
Yeah, I'll have to add some of those to the list that I've yet to read myself. So on to mine. My top
got,
5
Big Poppy?
nonfictions of the year. We're going to start with one that is near and dear to the heart of this channel, as this book, John Adams by David McCullough, was the subject of our first ever
started it all.
podcast, at least impartial.
Good old John.
So yeah, I had read Washington: A Life in 2022, and then picked this up earlier this year, and it was amazing. David McCullough is a great writer. He's very well known in the nonfiction history world, and this is a great one. It's a Pulitzer Prize winner. Another HBO miniseries of the same title is based on this book, starring Paul Giamatti. I highly recommend it to anyone. It's a very good show. But this is a great book, man. Just to get a look into a founding father's life is just really fascinating, especially this one. He was not a product of his time in as many ways as most of his peers were. In that he was a very strong anti-slavery voice in the era of our country's founding. He was very brash, not proper, and kind of in that almost, I don't want to use the wrong word, but just that era of where everything's just so cordial. And just like the social stuff was just so particular. He was just very brash and a different kind of guy. So, had a tough job, had a lot of tough situations come up, and he's just fascinating to read about. David McCullough is a great author, and I highly recommend this. Go check out our video if you're interested in that. So yeah, John Adams, David McCullough, 357,000 ratings with a 4.07 on Goodreads. I mean, that's not bad.
Yeah. Philadelphia
Next up
Massacre
for
came in.
me, I mean, dude, we couldn't get out of it without that.
We were so close, dude.
So close, man. So close. I mean, I really can't stand you. I honestly don't want to do this podcast anymore.
Guys, it's been a good ride.
It's been
Thank
good.
You for the 20s. Thank you for the tens and tens of views.
We appreciate it, but the fame has gotten to us, and we're gonna have to break up due to creative differences. Okay, so second on my list for nonfiction is, John Adams was the second president, Thomas Jefferson the third. This one is Thomas Jefferson: The Art of Power by John Meacham, an author that I've already mentioned in my honorable mentions. 40,000 ratings, a little over 4.0 on the Goodreads. And this one was great. I have a, huh?
No, I mean, I was just thinking. I mean, that makes it crazy, dude. Because Adams has like almost 400,000 reviews. Mm-hmm. That's like 10x what this says.
No, not 10 times.
Well, what does John Adams have? It's almost.
John Adams has through like 360,000. Yeah.
Yeah, that's almost.
This has 40,000. Is it?
Is that not 10 times?
I think you're right. Yeah.
That's crazy to think about, though.
Yeah, I mean, this one just shows definitely newer, but McCullough is just on a different level.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. As I was looking at that, I'm like, dang, because I feel 40,000 is still a lot. I mean, a lot, and then
for sure,
just shows that 400 or almost 400 is insane. Anyway,
yeah, and I mean, I have trouble saying which one I think is ultimately better between the David McCullough and John Meacham books. Yeah, it's really tough. It's hard to say. I mean, they're neck and neck in my opinion, and that's also reflected here in the ratings, obviously. Not that really means anything, but I would agree with it in that sense. But this is another really good one. Thomas Jefferson is a fascinating figure. He's kind of the politician of the founding fathers, the one that was the most, in many ways, considered like the most wise and like savvy as far as the way things. Intellectual is definitely probably the best word to use. Is a very eloquent writer, formed a lot of the thoughts and ideals. I mean, he wrote the Declaration of Independence, but he was also very compromised. flawed man as well. He's very notoriously known for owning a lot of slaves. The whole Sally Hemings thing, where he, you know, bore children with a slave and then owned those children as slaves. I mean, just really complicated, flawed
Oh
guy,
gosh.
to be clear. But as far as this nation is considered, he's a cornerstone. He is a founding father, and he's very important to where we are now. So, I mean, dude, go ahead and stop singing that. So yeah, highly recommend Thomas Jefferson by John Meacham. That's my number
I'm
2.
kind of mad I
On
didn't
to the
read that one,
next.
honestly.
Yeah, I mean, you
Like
missed out
looking
on
back.
that one, and I just have a feeling you're never getting back to it
No,
anytime soon.
it's gone.
I mean,
I've
there's
read
no
that through
chance.
you
That ship
vicariously.
has sailed. um, so number 3 on my list is going to be Frederick Douglass, Prophet of Freedom by David W. Blight. This only has 11,000 ratings with a 4.14 on Goodreads. Came out 5 years ago. This, I believe, was also a Pulitzer Prize winner, if I remember correctly. I believe it's on my edition saying that. I could be wrong. It might be something else, but it's definitely
It is for history 2019. There it is. Literary awards. First one.
okay, I didn't see it at first. Okay, great. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely a very good book. This is the most dense on my list and the longest as well. This was like 800 pages, I believe, and it is, I mean, it's thick. It's little word, little margin. But it's really good. It definitely was a little laborious at times getting through it, just because he went into some deep details and kind of veered off like from Frederick Douglass at times. But Frederick Douglass obviously, is a very important person in American history, specifically to, civil rights and, slavery being emancipated, all that kind of stuff. And, had a relationship with Lincoln and other people, that are well-known names, had a bunch of crazy interactions with those kind of people. And he was a very, very interesting, very, again, complicated and flawed, had a very interesting life, went through more than most people like us could possibly imagine. And this is a really great book. It's very, very comprehensive. Like, you get everything you need about Frederick Douglass. So if you're interested in learning more about him or this era, kind of around the Civil War era and slaves being freed and that whole story, and one of the people that was heavily involved in what happened after that fact in the Reconstruction era, this is definitely a book for you. But again, it is dense. It is a thick read, but it's well worth it. So that is number 3 on my list of nonfiction for the year. Next up, this one focuses on one of, if not my favorite figure in history to read about, and this one is Vicksburg, Grant's Campaign That Broke the Confederacy by Donald L. Miller. Now, this boy only has 715 ratings on Goodreads. It does have a 4.40 overall, so that's definitely a good sign, but not very many ratings. I mean, hasn't even broken 1,000 yet, so we'll see what happens. But the book has been out for about 4 years now, and that's where we are. So, I don't know why. I mean, there's just so many books that cover so many different things in history, and less and less people read history and books like this, so it's not a huge surprise. But this is a great book that, obviously, by the title, covers the campaign in Vicksburg in the Civil War, which was a very long campaign, involved many different military maneuvers and tactics, sieges, building stuff, supply line issues, routing, flanking, just everything you can think of. It was a months long campaign that the Union ended up winning in the end. It was one of Grant's greatest victories that kind of solidified him as far as his future is considered, and like making his place in history. Not that that's what he set out to do, but it definitely, he had victories that led up to Vicksburg that were very impressive, and he was becoming very well known as Unconditional Surrender Grant, and was being revered by the Union. But this one was pretty crazy, and it's like I said, it took a long time, so there were a lot of ups and downs, and there were mistakes made, and times when it looked like the tide might swing one way or the other. So it's definitely just a very interesting, entertaining read if you're into any kind of military history. This is definitely one for you. Again, Grant to me is one of the most fascinating people to read about. And this kind of shows off just his military acumen, and supposedly some of the tactics used in the Vicksburg campaign are still used in like military training today, just like the foundational tactics that he kind of, I don't know if he necessarily pioneered them, but used them to the best effect in, recent enough history. So, Napoleon mentions Grant, I believe, at one point. Not in the book we read, but somewhere else. I think I saw that just talking about his military. I'm sorry, not Napoleon.
I was like, what?
Not Napoleon.
I'm like,
Who am I thinking
that
of
man
right
was
now?
about 9 probably when.
Oh, not Napoleon. I'm thinking of somebody from the war that ended peace before World War One. I'm reading Napoleon right now and just read it before this video, so I just said that. It might have been the Kaiser, it might have been Churchill. I don't remember, but
Napoleon
either
came
way,
before Grant, but that's just how influential Grant was, dude. He
I mean,
just.
dude, it's crazy how far in both the future and the past he had an effect. Yeah, it's fascinating, man. I'm telling you, the
I
time
love that.
traveler Grant, as we know him. Dude, just another blunder for you to never forget. But
Dude, Grant
all
and
that to
Napoleon were
say,
boys, dude.
all that,
They went in
all
military
that to
school together.
say, this campaign and what Grant did is very well remembered by history and so on and so forth. So this was just a really good read. I ripped through this one. It's kind of thick, if I remember. Yeah, almost 700 pages, but I ripped
I
through
really
it. It was
hope to
really good.
God Ridley Scott doesn't get his hands on anything that has to do with Ulysses S. Grant. That's all I'll
I mean,
say.
bro, I would be crushed. Given some of his recent entries. So yeah,
Absolute blight.
last non-fic of 2023 as far as my favorites is going to be Collapse: How Societies Choose to Fail or Succeed by Jared Diamond. I actually started reading this on like the second day of January earlier this year, so this one's kind of going pretty far back for me. But so this is the second in the Civilization's Rise and Fall trilogy, which starts with Guns, Germs, and Steel, which is revered by in many circles as one of the greatest books of modern times. And the third one is called Upheaval. I've not read that one yet. I plan to next year, but this is number 2, and it's essentially kind of following up. Guns, Germs, and Steel kind of gives you the foundation of the world that we are now in and how everybody got where they are in different societies and people groups and this, that, and the other based on geography and economy and all these different things. In Collapse essentially evaluates, I think, 6 or 7 different societies that in one way or another collapsed. And again, in one way or another, and most of the time in a very, very big way, that collapse was due to ecological issues or just essentially the environment. Whether it's over on Easter Island where they just kept destroying all their trees so that they could build and transport those big heads they made and ended up like destroying all the wildlife in the process, and so they completely died off. um, there's a lot of different just things that he looks at. I think there's a state, an American state, that is, I think, at the very beginning of the chapter, it's either Montana. I think it's Montana. And he talks a lot about the ecosystem there and just different things that have happened in recent history that have really changed the wildlife and all the different kind of resources that used to be there and are now dwindling. He talks about Australia a bit and just the kind of agricultural issues that they've had throughout their history. So it's just a very cool look, and it's obviously the point and message of the book, and the hope that I think he wants from the book is for people to learn from environmental and ecological mistakes that have been made in past societies that led to disaster. Because regardless of what you think about protecting the environment, if we don't have resources, we die. And it's happened many times over in different societies. So I think, because this subject can obviously be politicized very easily. I think this is of extremely, both this book and Guns, Germs, and Steel. I don't know what Jared Diamond's political affiliations are, but they feel extremely non-political to me. They seem very cold, hard facts, and an unbiased evaluation of those facts. So I wouldn't let any political leanings deter you from reading this book. I think it's beneficial to everyone, and I think that these first 2 books, again, I haven't read the third, but I'm sure I'll think the same of it, that these first 2 books I think are essential for really any reader, especially if you're into nonfiction or anyone that, has an opinion on politics or, geological issues or, again, the environment. I think this is a very important book to read, along with Guns, Germs, and Steel, reading that one first. So highly, highly recommend it. I really enjoyed this read. It doesn't have as high of ratings as I would have expected. 3.93 with 70,000. I gave it a 5, but either way, I highly recommend it, and that is the last of my best nonfiction reads of 2023. You want to read any of those? Which one of those of my list do you think you would want to read the most?
Probably Vicksburg. Either Vicksburg or John Adams, I think.
Yeah, fair. Good choices, man. Couldn't blame you for either
they
one
all are. Yours are so different than mine, dude. Yours are like such deep dives, and I feel like they're all thick boys, and then all mine were like little pamphlets. Yeah, but
I do love them thick boys. I'm not gonna lie.
I do too. Normally, I just haven't had as much time. Well, I mean, not that I've ever really. Now that I'm thinking about it, but you know, the appeal is there for me. It's just once that fantasy gets itching, dude, it's just so tough for me to get away. Which I will say, some of the things going on in Napoleon, like I do. I mean, it's just weird how I'll just go back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
So.
It's when you're deep reading fantasy, you're just in fantasy mode and you want to read more. But once you slip in deep into nonfiction, you're like, this is all I need to be reading. I need to keep eating this up. At least that's how I feel whenever I'm reading.
Yeah.
Like that Napoleon, man. I mean, I'm a little bit a ways into part 3 now, and we've been slow burning this book because we've been reading so much fantasy. But I kind of don't mind it because I've been taking so many notes, like going back and rereading parts. So I feel like I'm really digesting this one. And what you said earlier definitely rings true for me as well. If we were done with Napoleon, I know for a fact it would be on this list. But since we haven't finished it, just didn't feel right.
Yeah. Can't lie.
Didn't feel honest. So that being said, yeah, I'm
40 minutes, dude. Who would have thought?
Who would have thought we could do it? So yeah, those are our nonfiction favorites of 2023. Let us know if you had any favorites as far as nonfiction. Throw them down in the comments, or if you have anything to say about these reads, if you've read them or anything like that, let us know. Anything else from you, Andy? From the peanut gallery over there?
We'll do like fiction / fantasy sci-fi stuff later on. We just have so many that we've done there. We couldn't combine these two, so we figured we'd split them up.
Yeah, so be on the lookout for some more closing of the year and beginning of the new year videos, and give us a comment. Let us know what kind of video you would like to see. What would really make your beanie twirl? Because honestly, that is the goal of this channel, is to twirl some beanies on some heads. So shout out, and we will see you next time.
Bye.